What a bullet! Scott Arfield! He's been threatening that recently, and all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end.
Burnley win the next ball. It's Rory now. On the outside, decent.
Barnes! He got it! Ashley Barnes with it! What a cross from Rory! And there was Ashley Barnes! And Burnley leading the derby.
Knocks it quickly. Finds Benson in space at the byline. Can Burnley get a goal here? Back for Brownell. Saved by the keeper!
Burnley won it to the end! That is magnificent! They deserve that!
On it by Paul Teller. On for a hat-trick.
He's got it! Hat-trick for Nathan Teller! Oh, he's on fire at the minute! 3-0 Burnley! It's Nathan Teller's day, and Burnley are 3 up here. Fantastic derby!
Here's Benson. Can he go on the outside? Comes inside.
Have a shot! Oh, what a goal! Manuel Benson once more! That is top class! Burnley have done it! Fantastic! Clarence deserve the championship title. They've been the best side throughout the campaign. Burnley have won the second tier. What a fantastic achievement. The players have been magnificent.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome along to the latest episode of Turfcast here on the Turfcast Podcast YouTube channel and the Turfcast podcast feeds. I wanted to do something a little bit different today. Obviously, we've had journalists and the local journalists on before, but I wanted to get their perspective on the Vincent Kompany thing because we've talked about it at length as fans, and obviously there's a lot of emotion involved as fans, but I think the local journalists obviously report and have close links with the club but aren't fans like we are, so they can take the emotion out of it, and obviously they have good links with the club and know more about what's going on than any of us do. Andy, welcome back. I think this is your 4th time on Turfcast. It's good to see you again, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. And Matt Scrafton from the Burnley Express making his debut. Welcome, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, nice to be here. No pressure. I'm on my debut.
Honestly, mate, no pressure at all. I always say I'm just some random middle-aged man doing some videos in his spare room, effectively. So no pressure. But obviously, I think you're in your first season covering Burnley, aren't you? We're coming towards the end of it. Well, it has ended. But how have you found it? Obviously, I think you were covering. Was it Fleetwood before this?
Blackpool,
no.
Don't say Fleetwood.
Yes.
So if you want a quick history, so I'm originally I'm on the other side of the country. I'm from Lincoln, but I moved over to the northwest 8 years ago now to cover Blackpool. That's my first sports job. And then at the end of last season, Blackpool got relegated. Thinking, what a time to jump on board with Burnley, and I've so two relegations in 2 seasons, and before that I hadn't had any. So it's been interesting.
So who did you do before that then? Was it Lincoln, or have you done Blackpool for?
No, Blackpool was my first sports job. Before that, I was started out as a news journalist, and then
I presume you're a Lincoln fan then.
I am, born and bred Lincoln. Yeah, so
I
won't mention that FA Cup game. I wasn't there.
I was just going to say, I presume you enjoyed that FA.
I wasn't there, but I did enjoy the Matt Reed, the rivalry with Joe Barton at the time. But unfortunately, I was covering the Blackpool game that day, so unfortunately I missed probably one of the best games in our history, but there we go.
Yeah, see, I guess that's the negative of a sports journalism job, isn't it? Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I have a sports journalism degree, but I just ended up failing in it, unlike you two have ended up having, decent jobs in it, so I just ended up working in TV. But I did always used to miss Burnley games and stuff when I was working in it in my 20s and stuff, and I did used to hate that, but at the end of the day, you're working sort of like in football, and that's obviously a dream. But we'll get into it anyway. I'll start with you, Matt, seeing as we are talking to you at the minute. Obviously, Kompany leaving, going to Bayern Munich. And just, by the way, for anybody watching this, just for some background, we are recording this on Tuesday morning. The plan is to put it out later in the week. So Kompany may have been announced when you're listening or watching this, but as we are speaking about this, it hasn't yet been announced. But obviously, we all know he's leaving. We all know it's a done deal. We all know it's imminent, and we're expecting an announcement pretty much any time, really. Like, it could happen while we're recording. We've just discussed that off air. It probably won't. But Matt, what are your thoughts on him leaving and joining Bayern Munich? Because it's just been a mad week, hasn't it? And it's come out of well, it seemed to come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he's going to what I have got stick for, saying the 5th biggest club in Europe, but the biggest club in Germany anyway. I just find it mental.
It is crazy. Yeah, I think the same reaction to you and all the fans initially, because obviously it came out on the Monday when Burnley season finished on the Sunday, and I don't know about you, Andy, but there's no particular feeling there that something was in the offing. Although you look back now and you think, oh, he said this or he's acting this way, and you sort of, you think, oh, were the signs there? I mean, I did think the Kompany was in a surprisingly good mood at the post-match press conference after the Forest game. I don't know if there's anything to read into that, but again,
suitcase were packed, was it? Yeah.
Maybe it's the end of the season and he just isn't in a good mood. It was a nice day, wasn't it? I don't know. Reading too much into it, but yeah, that initial surprise, shock as everyone else has, that you've gone from a team relegated on 24 points to, you say 5th, I'd probably say 3rd or 4th biggest club in the world. Certainly in that ballpark. But I think, what is it now? A week on now, and the more you think about it, the more you read into it, and I can see some sense into it. Clearly, it's not Bayern's number 1 choice. I think he's probably 8th or 9th choice. But I can see some sense into it. If you look at it, the 3 of the 4 seasons he's had in management, he has been teams that are used to having the ball, or not expected to win, but the pressure of being at the top end of a division. Obviously, the last season was the outlier. That was the the sort of the exception to the rule. But I can see some. If you look at some of the stats and the way he plays, the possession on the front foot, I can see some sort of logic to it. But there is still, come back to it, is still a massive surprise going from a massive low of this season to getting one of the biggest jobs in world football.
Yeah, Andy, your thoughts on him leaving then? Because I guess you'll just echo what myself and Matt have just said. I did personally think one day from what he showed last season, obviously when I'm saying last season, I'm referring to the Championship season, I did think that one day he would go on to this kind of job, potentially, but maybe in 10, 15 years, not instantly. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mad week, hasn't it, like I said?
Yeah, it's sort of, Burnley was, I think we all realised probably that Burnley was going to be a stepping stone on Kompany's sort of managerial journey. I don't think you could kid yourself that he was going to stay at Burnley for 15 years and take that be his main job. I think when you've got someone like Pep Guardiola effectively championing him for the Manchester City job, that he's on that sort of trajectory, but equally, it's a pretty steep trajectory and one you probably didn't see. Maybe you're sort of moving on to a bit more of a, not necessarily a mid-table Premier League club, but sort of, the Tottenham and Chelsea links last season, for example. Maybe that level of club, and then, the big clubs, if you like. And that's not to disrespect Chelsea or Tottenham, but I think at the moment in the standard of football, there's a clear hierarchy, and Bayern are well above Chelsea and Tottenham in that regard. But I think when you do look at it, and I think Matt's right, he's certainly not the first option. I think if he had been, I think a lot more questions would have been asked about Bayern and the process behind it. But when you look at the options they've gone through, like, the week before or 2 weeks before, they're looking at Crystal Palace's manager, Glasner. And so, you did sort of got to that level, if you like, of manager. That would have been a gamble in any sense, and Kompany certainly a gamble for them. But I think when you take a step back for it, I think, as Matt alluded to, the football that he plays, I think is suited to the better players of a division. And I think you see that, in the Championship winning season, the style of football he wants to play, he wants to dominate teams and sort of, play and press them into submission, if you like. And when you're going up into a league where you've got a lower quality of player, that's a challenge to do. And I'm sure what happened when he tried to go toe-to-toe with those teams at the start of the season and then had to adapt. But also, I guess, he's got that, he's been in the top dressing rooms. He knows how to win. Yes, as a player, not necessarily a manager, but he knows how to deal with the big personalities and the big characters that these clubs bring. So I think there is logic to it, but equally, I think, it's one of those that can go either way. This could be the perfect job for Kompany, and theoretically, other than maybe PSG, I know Bayern at the moment are having a bit of a struggle domestically in terms of, that dominance this season, but they will start next season, you would think, as favourites again. And you would think they're gonna win it, or they're gonna be challenging for the top honours without necessarily having to be, absolutely sensational, if you like. So it could be the perfect job for them, but equally, and that perfect, step up, But equally, it could go terribly wrong, and he could be looking for, he could, buy in a very political club and aren't shy of making big decisions quickly. And if they're not happy with what the manager's doing, they'll get rid of them. We've seen that in recent history. So that's the gamble he's taken, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's Bayern Munich. You can't turn them down, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I do believe that his philosophy will translate well to an elite level club, like you said, who are used to having the ball. And I do believe his philosophy will translate well to the Bundesliga, that's not as competitive as the Premier League and not as physical as the Premier League. So I can see the logic behind it. But sticking with you, Andy, do you not think it's a bit too soon in his career for Bayern? You've said there it can go either way. Like, I genuinely agree. I couldn't predict it, but if I looked at the Bundesliga league in in November and he was third and on the verge of getting sacked, I wouldn't be surprised. But if he was first to running away with it, again, I wouldn't be surprised. So I don't know. I think it might be too soon because it can go either way, and if it goes the wrong way, his stock will plummet again, I think. Yeah,
it could be, and I think that there's an element of for him. When this type of job comes along, as I said, you can't say no to it because, if Kompany has not a great start next season, if he stays as Burnley manager, and suddenly there are even more questions about him, then he's got himself into a really awkward position of where does he go next? And he, after taking a lot of steps forward in that championship season and sort of raising his profile, I think his stock did fall and has fallen, but clubs these days, it's a lot more focused on the principles of a manager, and there's a lot more that goes into behind it of, what did he do last season? There's more to look at than that, and I think clubs are more taking that into consideration now. I mean, you look at Liverpool's managerial search and the amount of detail and data and all that type of stuff that went into that to try and find the right man, and Bayern will have done, the same, although a lot longer process because of the amount of people who sort of said no to them. I do think you're right. It could be a big step too early. But it's impossible to tell because as you say, it could just work perfectly, and he could walk in the door and he commands a respect. He has an aura about him that players want to play for him. I think it certainly helped them secure signings for Burnley in the last 2 years. I don't think you would see certain players at the club if Kompany wasn't the manager, for example. So he does demand that respect and that order, and he's someone that people listen to. So those players few of them will probably have played against them, and we'll have seen his leadership skills on the pitch. So but as you say, that it's not like he was comfortably winning the league with Anderlecht, and he's talked about the different implications that were on him at that point. He had to turn around a team that were about 7th or 8th in Belgium, and the money was tight, and he was changing significant change of squads season in the couple of seasons he was there. So he was dealing with those types of challenges, but it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because he's shown that the Premier League was too big for Burnley and him, I think, a little bit. I think he showed his naivety, his inexperience, especially at the start of the season. And you see by the end of the season when he's adapted things and finds a formula to compete and then compete for results and get results. And I think you see he will have learned a lot, and it's whether it's how he's used this season to learn and what he then takes forward. But he's doing it from a much higher quality of player, which always helps.
Yeah, 100%. Coming to you then, Matt, how do you think he does at Bayern in the Bundesliga? Do you think he gets off to a good start and does well, or do you think he might struggle?
He'll do well. I think he's the comments. I think it was from Julian Nagelsmann who said, it's a good thing for him that Bayern are such a low. Really, I can't remember the stat, but they finished third, didn't they, rather than second? Which I can't remember last time Bayern finished, as low as third, and obviously didn't win any cup either. So I think he's coming from a low base, but again, it's Bayern Munich. There's always going to be that big expectation. So it'll be difficult because Xabi Alonso is still there with Leverkusen. They don't look like they're going anywhere. So it'll be a massive thing if he can overcome them and win the league. But just going back to the question you asked Andy about, is it too soon for Kompany? I think the management market is just changed a lot, just in this summer, but especially over the last year or two now, where I think clubs, especially the top ones, if you've had one good season, you're straight into, candidate for the top job. And we've seen with Kompany, we've seen it with Maresca looking going to Chelsea.
Yeah.
We've seen it with Kieran McKenna. It looks like he's going to stay now with Ipswich. Might change by the time this is released, but he's been in the running for Chelsea and Brighton as well. So it looks like if you have one good season and you play that progressive sort of style of football that the top clubs will like, then you're straight in the running anyway. Clearly different on this occasion, as I said, with Bayern and the context behind their managerial search, which has gone on for about 3 or 4 months now. But yeah, I think just the managerial market in general is changed. You said, in a perfect world, Kompany might have got this big club in 10, 15 years. I just think football's completely different now. I think if you show that you can play good football and, you've got the personality to do it, they'll sort of rush you in. You see like young referees now that they're rushed up the league straight into the Championship and the Premier League. That's almost happening with head coaches now. If you think they can do it, you'll get sort of pushed to the top quite quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these names that, like you said, back in the day, it'd be your Mourinho's, your Contes, and all these massive managers that had only really been in the conversation for these sort of jobs. So it has definitely changed. You are spot on there. Sticking with you though, Matt, what was it like in press conferences? Now, I'm not going to lie, I did watch pretty much every one of them live as and when I could, so I did get a sort of feel to it. But for people who were actually there, what was it like in the press conferences?
He's always been good. He's always been a good talker, as everyone knows. He's very talented man. Obviously, as you said at the start of the show, I wasn't here last season, but I was told by people like Andy and people I followed at the Burnley Express that he was very open, very honest about things, and perhaps he's not been as open this season, which I suppose in one way is probably to be expected when you're losing every week. You got the same questions every week about this and that and why is this going wrong and stuff like that. And it's when you're in the midst of a relegation fight and you're in the midst of a losing run, it's hard to come out and be completely honest and completely honest about why things are going wrong. You can't really do that for the morale of your players. But yeah, as I said, that's the only sort of change I've noticed. Although I wasn't here last season, he's probably not been as open as I was perhaps expecting. But he's always a good talker. The only thing I was probably frustrated with, coming from my background of sort of the lower leagues, a Lincoln fan and Blackpool, I've covered them in all the 3 divisions. It's normally it's just me and someone else from BBC Lancashire. Whereas obviously this year the big change has been, sometimes there's 8, 9, 10 journalists. Obviously the embargo section afterwards there's a decent number of journalists, and a lot of the national tabloids want a line from Kompany about Manchester City and look back at games against Man United or Liverpool, and for me, for the local guys in the Burnley Express, we're not particularly interested in that. So that was sort of one frustrating thing, but that wasn't his fault. And to be fair, he always sort of batted them off, and he was always quite keen to stress that he just wants to talk about Burnley, really. So yeah, he handled that quite well.
Yeah, just sticking with you again, Matt. Sorry. I think it was you that asked in his last pre-game press conference about the Brighton links. I think it was you where he said, I'm going to stop you there. You can do better than ask a question like that. Did you not find that frustrating? I know we always use a line, I never answer questions on my future. Yeah. But did you not find that bit of him frustrated? Because you mentioned there he was quite open, but as soon as you're asking questions on his future, he would close, wouldn't he, a bit? Did you find that a bit frustrating?
Yeah, but also I knew it was coming. I mean, he's done it all along, so I knew it was coming. I after the press conference, I saw, as he walked off, we shook hands, and I said, I had to ask it. I knew you weren't going to answer it, but I still had to answer it. Still got to do our job. I think just to provide context to that. I mean, that first bit where he said, what you repeat the line? What he said? It was, oh, you can do better than that. To be fair, that was said jokingly. To be fair, you read it, in a text on the Burnley Express website, it doesn't come across that well, but it was said jokingly. But yeah, it is frustrating for fans. I can imagine when, especially when there's strong links, as there were sort of this time last year with the Tottenham and Chelsea, the links there, and you're just not acknowledging it at all. I can completely get the frustration out of it. But to be fair, he has been consistent from the start. It's not like he's flip-flopped and changed and said, I'll address this link one time and being completely different the other. So, he's been consistent with it. But yeah, as I said, I completely understand from supporters' frustration that you want him to come out and, you don't even have to sort of say, yes, I'm staying, but you can give, a bit more. You can, we all know
exactly that.
We've all seen previous interviews with other managers before. There's ways of getting around of it without just saying no comment, basically. So yeah, a bit frustrating, but as I said, it was pretty expected.
Yeah, fair enough. Andy, coming up to you then. Obviously, sometimes when you see managers leave clubs, they end up coming back to the clubs and signing 50% of the squad, as you often see Chelsea do with Brighton. My worry is now that I was worried about a player exodus. I'll be honest, I'm not too worried about Burnley players going to Bayern. But do you think that there could be a bit of maybe one or two players that he'll sniff around at? I know Matt's already put the link out on Twitter that I think somebody in Germany put it out about him potentially going for Martson. Obviously, that won't affect us, but obviously he might look at the likes of Sander and Odebear. That's probably a bit extreme, them two going to Bayern, but I guess you never know. Kompany going to Bayern was a shock, to be fair.
Yeah, it's I know what you mean. It's probably difficult because I think I think what came out of this season was no one was really a significant standout. I know Sanderberg was, I think, quite clearly the player of the season and stood out from the rest, but it still didn't, he didn't, I guess, scream, he's ready for a move to a top 4 club, if you like. Now, someone may see something in him and believe that, and he certainly got all the attributes to, I think, play at that level, and that's what's always sort of been said about him when he came to Sheffield United as a pretty young player, and just never really has been able to take the step. I think Odebear probably would make the most sense. Kompany loves him. It's fair to say. I asked him about him a couple of games, like towards the end of the season, and he basically said he didn't really want to talk about him because he'd probably say too much in terms of how great he thinks he is, how great he thinks he's going to be. I think we've seen the potential, and the fact that he was, a consistent player for Burnley and one of the consistent contributors, I guess, throughout the season, at 19 is really impressive in the Premier League in his sort of, first season over. But yeah, it's you look at the level of quality that Bayern have got. With Odebear, even if he did sign him, would he get in? How many games would he play? Type thing. I mean, it could be one where you sign him, the potential, and you loan him for a year or something like that. But yeah, it's tough to see him coming and sort of cherry picking many, if any. I think it's. I mean, for Burnley, it would be probably handy because I think we all know and accept that Burnley have got to make at least a couple of sales this summer. I think Kompany going helps in that sense because they've brought a significant chunk of money in from him leaving. Now, obviously, if they go and get a manager that needs compensation, they'll have to use some money for that. But yeah, I think there's a few players that may interest them, but whether they're realistic targets and whether you would think the Bayern and the scouting network have probably got a list of players who are probably better and more maybe experienced at the top level or have shown a better level. But yeah, I think if I was to pick one, for example, it probably would be Odebear because, as I say, Kompany really, really admires him and thinks he's going to be a superstar by the way he speaks about him. Yeah. But yeah, it's is he Bayern level? I don't think so yet. He may be in years to come, but not at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. I do think he goes on to have a very, very, very bright future, does Wilson Odebear. Same with Luka Koleosho as well, if he comes back well from his injury. And I did think Aaron Ramsey as well, but I know he didn't do very well in his cameos for Burnley. And I know that the injury is probably worse than expected with him after watching him limping around the pitch the other day. I'll just stick with you, Andy, because you did mention there you're expecting Burnley to sell a few players. Obviously, the compensation money, which we will get onto, for Kompany will help. But how many players are you expecting to see leave Burnley? Because I am a little bit worried that it could be quite a lot.
So this is where it gets a little bit difficult, I think, because if you take let's just say hypothetically Kompany was staying, I think you would have to make sales and you would probably want to reshape some of the squad anyway. So it's difficult to put a number on it because at the end of the day, you don't quite know what offers you're going to get for certain players, and you may need to hit a certain number in terms of what you need to bring in. And if an offer, if it's just not good enough, say someone comes in and bids £6 million for Sanderberg, and this is all hypothetical, of course, but you're not taking that. But if you don't get a higher offer, which is more respectable, more around his value, then it doesn't really make sense to sell. I think Burnley are in a much better position, obviously, than they were a couple of years ago when Kompany walked in the door. I mean, the squad is huge now, and they've got players. A lot of players coming back on, from loans who might be able to bring in a little bit of money. There's already been interest in James Trafford, for example, and he could move on. I guess you also don't know because you don't know what manager's walking in the door yet and what players he's going to like and what players, he's going to think, no, we definitely can't sell this one, or there might be someone who you thought might play a massive part next season, but the new manager might not be in his plans type thing. So may move them on. And then I think you've also got the idea of, and it's difficult to know exactly, but Kompany leaving, a lot of these players signed for Kompany, signed for Burnley because of Kompany, and it's do they fancy playing for the next manager that comes in, it's a lot of question, and you can question players' mentalities a little bit, but I think there are elements, do they want to play in the Championship? What happens to a lot of these players? And then you've also got the players who were on the periphery with Kompany, who you would suspect were probably definitely going to leave. Now might stay because the new manager might have them in their plans, and you're looking at sort of the Bensons and the Rorys, who obviously played such a big role in getting Burnley promoted, but then didn't really get a chance in the Premier League. Now, obviously, Kompany has reasons for that, and he's sort of spoken about them. But if a new manager comes in and says, you're part of my plans, and I'll give you the chance in the Premier League, then that might change their perception. So there's a lot of moving parts, I guess, in that it's what interest comes in, what players want to move on, what players that the new manager, whoever that may be, wants to keep, and can he convince some that they may be undecided a little bit about the futures, about can he keep them, can he get them on board, and then obviously you've got the players who may have been, I'm definitely leaving this summer, now might have a rethink. So there's loads of moving parts. I don't think you can put a number on the amount of players that could leave, because the squad is so big that players will leave. Because it is just massive. I know, Matt, you've got your spreadsheet of players, and it's just like never ending. And then because you forget about some of the lads who were on loan, the Twines, the McNallys, who you've just sort of, because you've been so focused on the Premier League, and they've been getting on in the Championship, and suddenly they're players now you have to factor in, because you've shown you can play a Championship level. Can he take those next steps? Because they're all, a lot of them are young players. So it's going to be really interesting. I don't think you can sort of predict it, because there's so many moving parts and so many factors which could influence things moving forward.
Yeah, I said the same thing on the most recent live, like the fact that we have the Bensons and Zarorys, and even Muric, who I thought were adamant were leaving, could end up staying now. But yeah, Matt, as Andy mentioned there, good work on that spreadsheet. I did enjoy that. But the squad is going to need trimming down, isn't it? But at the same time, we're going to need new blood coming in, so we could see a high turnover of players again, couldn't we, this summer?
Yeah, well, as Andy was saying, it's there's so much up in the air, it's so much uncertain. All I reflect on is a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Andy Bays from BBC Radio Lancashire. He sort of asked, do we expect a lot of sales this summer? Obviously, we saw with the club accounts, the club saying they're going to have to sell this summer to make up that shortfall in TV revenue, which, we all inevitable thinking, like, there's going to be some big sales this summer. Thinking Sander Berg, as Andy said, James Trafford keeps been linked the last few days. But Vince Kompany seemed quite strangely positive, a lot more positive than I was expecting. I don't know if he'd had certain guarantees from the club, but they wouldn't have to sell as many. So that'll be interesting. Obviously, we don't know what will change with the new manager. Clearly, there's going to be a number of outgoings. You can't have the squad they've got at the moment. I think it was 39. I think they've got, if assuming Charlie Taylor and Jay Rodriguez sign new deals, and I think that's counting Assignon and Bruno Larson as well. Obviously, the club wanting to bring them back again. Depends what happens with the new manager. But you'd like to think they want to bring at least one, or if not two, of those back. So yeah, it'll just be a very interesting summer. I suppose for fans, it's quite exciting, I suppose, in one way. There's a lot that's going to be going on. I suppose it's quite different for Burnley fans. Used to Sean Dyche, a very sort of stable, not many signings every summer, just plodding along nicely, which obviously has its pros as well. But yeah, it promises to be an interesting summer. I think lots of speculation, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. There already has been. And that's not just on the manager, but again, we'll get on to short lists soon. I do want to ask you both a question, actually. I'll stick with you, Matt, for now. Obviously, Belgian journalist, Sasha, apologies, I'm going to butcher his name, Tovaliri. I think that's what it is. I think that's how you say it. Yeah. He has said on the BOLN podcast and himself on his Twitter feed that Kompany was looking for a way out since April the 22nd or something around them lines. Is that the vibe you two were getting from him? I don't. I mean, you met him every week, twice a week on most occasions, actually. Were you getting the vibe that he wanted out?
I'd say no. I'd say no. But then again, as we've seen prior to the Bayern Munich, there's been a lot of links with the Brighton stuff. I think even with the mention of Brentford. I think if Thomas Frank left, as soon as the Chelsea came up, natural speculation there, given the links last summer. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but from face value, for the press conferences and the time that we met him, I didn't get the vibe that he was pushing and itching to get out. Even after, before the Nottingham Forest game, in the Friday press conference, he was talking extensively about the summer plans and about he seemed. I know it's easy to do that. You can easily talk about summer plans, but he seemed like he was clearly on the ball with everything, and he just seemed a lot firmer than I think the week or two before that. He seemed maybe a bit unwavering. Before that Forest game, he seemed very certain about, as I said, about the plans and going forward. He clearly. On top of everything, but as we started this podcast out on when Bayern Munich come calling, you can't really say no. So I think there's two separate instances there. But as I said, you can't say no to Bayern. But I didn't get the vibe that he was itching to get out. No.
Yeah,
I think the Tottenham after the Tottenham game when he shared about it's the day one of being successful again. I think for me that was. He didn't have to say that. He didn't have to go as strong as he did on that, and that felt to me anyway. And obviously, you can sometimes read between the lines or get 2 and 2 and get 5 or something. But to me, as Matt was saying, there was a lot of talk about what was next and whatever division they were going to be in, which he sort of used as a phrase every now and again. That he was looking ahead to next season and sort of planning was underway. So. I wrote in the relegation piece that I did that sort of the expectation was, he was going to stay unless there was a job offer that he couldn't really turn down. And at the time, I didn't know that was that one, isn't it? But in hindsight, it looks very smart. But yeah, that was the vibe I was getting from people. There was no way that Burnley were going to sack him or anything like that. That was pretty obvious. That had been obvious sort of throughout the season, really, and how they'd stuck by him and sort of how the power that they're giving him to shape the club and everything like that. So yeah, the vibe was, to me anyway, was that he was going to stay. And that sort of the way he talked after Tottenham, for me, that's what it felt, because he didn't have to go as strong as he did on it. But he did, and he's as Matt said, he's an intelligent thinker, and every answer is considered, and there's a meaning behind everything he says, and yeah, so that's the vibe I was getting as well.
I agree with you two. Now, I'm not going to for 1 second accuse Sasha of lying, because I hinted at that once on Twitter and it didn't end well for me. But the fact that he's said the things he said in the way he said it, like I don't think he was itching to get out in April. I agree with you two. I just think it was a case of he probably wasn't bothered about Brighton or Brentford, and it's probably just a case of, well, Bayern Munich have come along. I can't say no to this. So I guess we'll never know unless he comes out and rubbishes it or says yes, that is the case, which I doubt he would do. But moving on, obviously the compensation figure, both of you have reported a similar figure, and I think I said on one of my videos recently, I would trust you two on the compensation figure more than sort of like the international journalists, because you two have close ties to the club. So I presume you both have got the information of the compensation figure off the same person or the same people at the club. So it's around, was it 12 million? Yeah. 12 million.
Euros.
Yeah, 12. Yeah, that was the bit I got confused about at first, because you put 12 million euros, and then I think you put 10.2 million pounds, Matt. And then I'm like, hold on, that's the exchange rate. That's about right.
It happens all the time, isn't it? When you see like transfers from England to Europe, and it's always confused, and you see some journalists get mixed up. So one will put, I don't know, not company player, I don't know, 18 million, and then come back to England, there's a journalist saying 18 million pounds. There's always confusion in the mix up, but it looks like it's just over 10 million pounds.
Yeah, just sticking with you, Matt.
Sorry,
Sorry,
I think it involves some sort of bonuses as well. That's not a set figure. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I think it's
Andy did put initial. Yeah, didn't you, Andy?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the structure of it, but I believe that there's potential for it to rise, based on probably his success.
Yeah, I mean, my next question then was going to be: do you not both think that's a little low? But again, I guess the next point is, well, it is initial, and although you say you don't know the structure of it, hopefully it rises to 15, 16 million euros based on, I presume, amount of games, I presume success as it usually is.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen the piece that I've done on the history of compensation fees. I think he's fourth when it goes through, and if it's correct, it's the fourth most expensive of all time. So taking that context, you can't really say it's low. I've always, to be fair, talking away from Burnley for a second, I've always found it weird how managers are quite cheap compared to the player market. When you think of, I don't want to pick on a certain player, but when you think of but I'm going to do it anyway. When you think of a player like Anthony going for 70, 80 odd million, and then you get managers. I'm trying to think of an example of a higher profile manager leaving, but 10 million does seem quite cheap. But again, when you compare it to the context of previous moves, it is quite low. But obviously, the ones that are ahead of him, people like Graham Potter going for. I think he was actually 15 million, but it was 21 when you factor in he took all of his backroom staff as well, because obviously Chelsea like to hire everyone from Brighton, don't they? So I think it's probably about right, but I think the club probably did the right thing, setting out from the start. Quite it looks like Alan Pace from the start was putting out quite a hard, fast rule early on, and then inevitable negotiations. But I suppose it's difficult when you've got Kompany already agreed things with buying, personal team terms already agreed, already set in the move by the sound of it. It's already sort of done, just this conversation that needed done. And then once you're in that position, you don't really have much of a poke hand, do you, there at that stage?
Yeah, that was my next question, to be fair, like the club thought process on it. Andy, I presume you'll just echo what Matt has just said, obviously, but if Kompany has already decided he wants to go, even though there were early reports of the compensation fee being around 20 million euros, I guess the club were just thinking, well, let's just get it done. He wants to leave. Let's make sure they don't take the piss out of us and we get enough, but let's get it done first and foremost. And then obviously with it being the initial fee, it could rise anyway. But I presume that was a club thought process.
Yeah, you would suspect so. They would have gone high with the initial asking price, I'm sure. But yeah, I guess you are sort of the fight is already lost in the sense of Kompany's pretty much decided he's going, and then I guess the problem you might end up is if you don't agree this fee, then what does Kompany do? How angry is he going to be? Is he going to not again hypothetical, but would he walk type things to try and make sure it gets done? It's all that sort of factoring in, and Burnley have sort of and Pace and the ownership have tried to, I guess, move the club into a different place in terms of wanting to be, and I don't. This isn't meant disrespectfully, but be that stepping stone for players to go on or managers to go on and achieve their aspirations in their careers, because you look back at like Weghorst, for example, and he comes in on that sort of verbal agreement of, if you keep us up, brilliant. If you don't, it's on the premise that we've got an agreement here that with the World Cup coming up, we'll let you move on in the summer. And even Weghorst, that, when he was on loan and then goes on loan to Manchester United, Burnley didn't have to get involved in that. They could have gone, well, no, he's just on loan there, that's it. But they wanted to try and help facilitate it because that's what the player wanted. And there's an element of that works into it as well. And because I think under Dyche a little bit, the club, it was sometimes a little bit difficult to get out. You look at Tarkowski being the main example in that, there was summer after summer, there's so much speculation and offers coming in from clubs who were higher up in the league than Burnley, or competing for Europe, and Leicester being probably the big example for where they were challenging for top four and stuff like that, and in the end he has to basically run his contract down to leave because Burnley didn't want to sell him, and they were in a strong financial position where only offers that blew them away they needed to accept. So I think there's an element of trying to change that narrative a little bit. That's not to say that Burnley are just like this, this selling club type thing. They obviously want to retain players, but I think there is an element of when it's a Bayern Munich, it's a fight that you're not going to win, and then the battle is the compensation. But I think Matt's right in that you're almost starting from a difficult position, because if you don't have sort of a release clause or something written into a contract, which is like, well, it's 15 million, for example, that's what you've got to pay. Don't bother sign and negotiate. That's it. Then it becomes a little bit different. But if you don't have that sort of, to fall back on, if you like, then that can be problematic, and you might not be, you're not negotiating on the front foot, for example. So I think that some of those factors will have worked in, but I think ALK, Alan Pace are shrewd negotiators. They don't want to be taken for mugs by anyone. I think we've seen that in some of the transfer dealings where they value a player and they won't really deviate too much on a price, whether that's incomings or outgoings. They try as much as possible to stick to what they believe the value is, because I think if you don't do that, then clubs can start trying to take the mick out of you, if you like. So yeah, it's they'll have tried as much as possible to make sure that they got the best deal for Burnley, given that the factors that were in place as well were not exactly in their favour.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. I guess the next worry, Matt, is the backroom staff. Now, early reports were that Bellamy would be going to Bayern Munich with him, and then also came out that Mike Jackson would be going to Bayern Munich with him. Now, contrasting reports have said that both of them will be staying at the club. There was reports that Bellamy had already left, but just sticking with Jackson, because that's the one that is originally was definitely leaving, now definitely staying. Is it confirmed that, well, not officially confirmed, obviously, but is he staying or is he leaving? What's the situation with Mike Jackson?
I've not had it confirmed either way, but I'd expect him to stay. I mean, I was surprised when it first came out that he was joining Kompany. I think from a club point of view, I think they do need someone, whether it's a sort of under 23s type or someone in Mike Jackson's role who does stay. As we've seen, Burnley have a different structure, don't they, to a lot of clubs, where a lot of clubs have the head coach role, whereas Vince Kompany was clearly the manager and was clearly in charge of everything. He was in charge of his staff. He brought all of his staff with him. All of his players, as we've seen with all the interviews, came into Burnley because of him, which is great when you've got someone like Kompany and who can influence and bring in all these people. But it's not so great when they go, because you're left with very little. If Kompany had, doesn't look like it's going to happen, but if he had taken all the staff with him, Burnley would have been left with very little. So I think it is important they do have someone there. So I think Matt Jackson could be that figure who stays consistently at the club, irrespective of who is in charge. As Craig Bellamy, again, conflicts on that. I don't think he's going, but there's some talk of him almost leaving Burnley completely. I'm not entirely sure what's happening yet, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out in the wash when Kompany's move is confirmed.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. Like the Bellamy situation is the one that confuses me the most, because there were rumours that he'd left around, or decided he was going to leave around a month before the end of the season. Then it came out he was joining Kompany. Now it comes out he's staying and wants the manager's job. Like, what? I guess as Matt said, it'll all come out in the wash. But what's the situation with Bellamy that you know, if you know anything different?
Uncertain, I think, is the best way for me to put it. I'd heard similar that there was thoughts that he was going to leave. I think what I've heard is the company was planning a pretty significant staff overhaul. You see it with the goalkeeper coach going. I think the performance coach Bram Gears potentially was going to leave, but this was all before the Bayern interest as well. So I think he now might be going with Kompany. I don't know that for definite, but I think that's what's happening. Jackson, my understanding is he's staying. He's certainly not going with Kompany. I don't think Bellamy was ever going with Kompany. From my understanding, anyway, I don't think that was ever the case. It obviously just makes sense that as most managers do, they take the assistant wherever. So yeah, I think it's a little bit uncertain with Bellamy, because I guess there's an element of does he want the job? Does he want the Burnley manager job? Is he a candidate, whether he is or not? We would offer an element of continuity in that regard, and that him and Kompany were very, very similar, and how they saw football, how they wanted to play. So there's that element. I don't know whether he is in the frame or not, but Yeah, I think like Matt said on Jackson, that for my understanding, the players really like him, which is important, for any coach really. But I think to have that sort of continuity figure, I think the fact that he stayed and became part of Kompany's staff was pretty significant. I think it was a testament to the job and the impression that he'd made while being in in the interim role, at the back end of that relegation season. And Kompany brought his team and has reshaped the staff, but Jackson stayed. So evidently he was doing, he was impressing Kompany and doing what Kompany wanted. Sort of involved in that defensive unit and the work going behind that. And I think you saw the improvements as the season went on. This season, obviously, last season was an excellent season defensively for Burnley, although they didn't actually have much defending to do because they had so much of the ball. But so I think it's a testament to the work he's done and sort of the relationships he's built, and having that sort of sounding board for players who, when the new manager comes in, and they'll obviously bring a big, well, not necessarily a big team, but they'll bring their own team in, and certainly put people in place that they want to work with. But to have that consistency does help as well, because even for the fact of Jackson will know these players. He's worked with some of them for 2 years, some of them for 1 year. He'll know, how they work, how you can get them motivated, what they do like, what they don't like, and even just being able to relay that to the new manager, and and then factoring that into meetings and training sessions and how they're going to speak to them, and the best way to try and get the best out of them. All that those little things can help that you don't necessarily think about when a staff member moves on, for example, or does stay put. So I think, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Now, apologies for those listening and watching for the last 5 minutes if everything has been announced and it's been announced that Bellamy and Jackson are staying. I did realise that pretty much halfway through the answers there, but I guess we'll see. Fingers crossed it all does come out in the wash, and the likes of Jackson especially are staying. But we'll see what happens with Bellamy, because I think he does want the manager's job. But again, that's not any inside info. I don't have any at all, and I always say that. And before we get into the exciting bit where we talk about who's on the shortlist and the new manager, I just want to remind everyone that Turfcast podcast is sponsored by Wave Car Finance. Wave Car Finance are a local car finance company who specialise in getting you your dream car through their fantastic one-to-one personalised service. Their finance-first approach ensures that you can secure the very best finance in a deal tailored to suit you. And they can even settle any existing finance agreement and swap your current car into a new one. And to celebrate this partnership between Wave Car Finance and Turfcast, if you mention Turfcast to them, they will give you a voucher worth up to £200 to spend at the Burnley FC Club Shop on completion of your finance deal. So why not pop down to their stunning showroom in Warley, or give them a call, or even just send them an email or message them on social media to start your new car adventure today. And don't forget to mention Turfcast, because when you do, you basically get £200 worth of Burnley FC merchandise for free. And as I've said on several shows, now's the time to do it because there's a big sale on. Or I guess you could wait till the new shirt's out and get all the 3 new shirts for effectively free. But right then, lads, let's get into the shortlist chat. Now, there's only one person putting the shortlist stuff out there, and that is Alan Nixon. And every time I put something out by Alan Nixon, I just get abused for putting stuff out by Alan Nixon. But the stuff that we have heard from Nixon is Cooper's on the list, Lampard's on the list, and Scott Parker's on the list. Is there any truth in these names that are coming out?
Andy, do you want to go first, or do you want me to take
it? I think, well, from what I'm sort of getting, is that the club are sort of putting the feelers out and sort of, getting a sense of what's available and where they want to go. I think it's likely that they'll want to stay with that progressive, coach who develops young players. So I think Cooper makes loads of sense, and it's not a surprise that he's sort of been installed as the favourite, if you like. He's obviously, he knows how to get promoted. He kept Forest in the league last season, and who knows, he may have done so again this season if he hadn't been sacked. So yeah, I don't. It's difficult at the moment, because I think there's still sort of names that make sense that are getting linked. But yeah, I think Burnley is still in that, from what I'm aware, is still in that sort of process of figuring out the shortlist. Obviously, Liam Rossini has been another one. It makes loads of sense, and I think what I would say is I think Burnley in a really good position in that. I think the managerial market is pretty good at the moment. I think there's a lot of options. There's a lot of ways you can can go. You know, can you entice a David Moyes? Whether Burnley fans would like that or not, but you know that caliber of level, manager who you know has been there and done it in the Premier League. Because I think that's what you've got to also factor in. You know, yes, you need a manager who can get you up from the Championship, but you also want a manager who can keep it in the Premier League. And you know, there's no. I don't think there's an obvious like this will definitely work type manager. I think Cooper's probably as close to that as you're probably going to get. But I think there's others who they admire as well, and I think it's a case of putting that shortlist together and seeing, you know, who makes the most sense. Because it's an enticing prospect for a manager. You know, you've got, I know there's a lot of players, but there's a lot of good, exciting, promising young players in that squad that you could work with and develop. And you know, they've had a couple of years or 1 year in England at least. You know, they've had that time to adapt, and you know, it's Burnley are going to be one of the favourites to go up next season. So you've got that. Yes, you've got the pressure and the expectation of that, but you're walking into a side that's, you know, pretty set up for a promotion charge and a promotion challenge, and then, you know, a year on you'll be a Premier League manager if you walk into Burnley's job if all goes well. So I think there's loads of reasons why it should be a desirable job for managers. But yeah, I think Burnley is still forming that process. I mean, they will have done due diligence on managers, because I think every club does at this point. Every club's, you know, just keeping abreast of what's going on, who's available, the type, you know, the profile of certain managers. But ultimately, they will not have expected Bayern Munich to walk in and go, "Yeah, we're taking your manager. Cheers, lads." So there's that element to it. So you know, it's certainly not sort of, you know, I can't imagine that they're panicked, but I think there's an element of, you know, it is a massive curveball that's been thrown in here. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how it develops. But I think, yeah, they're still in the sort of shortlist phase and seeing what managers make the most sense for them. And then, you know, I don't think it's going to be a rushed process. I think they're going to make sure they try and get it right. And we'll, you know, they'll go from there.
Yeah, I guess you echo them sentiments then, Matt, or is there anything else? Any left field names that you may have heard?
No, I think I agree with Andy. We're clearly in that early stages now, aren't they? Where they're just collecting names, collecting that list, and we'll probably hear quite a few more names in the next few days, as you know, agents work hard to get their clients sort of in the running. But I completely agree with Andy. I think it's a really good list. I think there's some really good names in there. I've been quite surprised reading some supporters saying it's quite uninspiring. I suppose that's only natural when, you know, you're looking at a list of out of work managers. So it's not particularly exciting, is it? But I think there are some really good names, and just depends what the club is going for. Obviously, there's been some talk of they want someone with a promotion on their CV, which is you know, understandable. They want someone with that experience, but you know, they clearly need to get someone in a similar mold to Kompany in terms of the style of play, I would say. So I think, you know, as I've said before, I think Steve Cooper is the obvious candidate for me. I just think he fits in with that style of play. He fits in with having that promotion on a CV. I think he would have kept Forest up last season. I don't think Forest proved a little bit under Nuno, especially Sunday, but nothing great to any great extent. So I think I really appreciate him as a manager. He's clearly got that experience of working with younger players from his time with England under 17s or 18s, you know, at the younger age groups. And he also really struck up a really good relationship with the Nottingham Forest fans, which I think is key. I think, you know, with all the talk, of course, about, you know, winning first and foremost, but as a fan first and foremost, I think that's a really key thing, to have that relationship with fans. And it seemed genuine as well. I think you see some managers where it's, you know, we all see the fist bump, don't we? And sometimes it can be engineered. But I think with Steve Cooper, it was a genuine connection with the Nottingham Forest fans. So I think he's just the obvious candidate for me. I think he ticks all the boxes. But as I said, it depends what the club is going for. So you've got Scott Parker linked last couple of days. He's obviously had 2 promotions from the Championship. So, you know, he's in the running. Not sure on Frank Lampard, but you know, if the club want to go down the route of a bigger name again, obviously that would fit the bill. And obviously he has worked in the Championship before, albeit, you know, not getting over the line with Derby. And I do like Liam Rossini. I know there's been some criticism of him, you know, that obviously they had quite a bit of investment at Hull. But you know, as we all know in football, just because you invested a bit doesn't mean you have a guarantee of success. And I think he took Hull from a low starting point to a team that was challenging for the playoffs. And I think if he kept on, he probably would have made that next step into into the playoffs with a good brand of football. Albeit I have heard some Hull fans saying it can be a bit too extreme at times. It can be a bit too, passing along the back and not really going anywhere at times for large periods. I think there was one high-profile moment at Hull where the keeper, similar to what happened with Burnley with James Trafford at some points, where the keeper had the ball at his feet, was waiting for a gap to open up to break that press, and it felt like it was going on forever. It was like a 30-second wait, and the club and the fans just turned and started booing it. So I think he would fit the style of play, but again, it probably a bit too extreme. So he might need to tweak that if he were to come in. But no, I completely agree with Andy. I think there's some really good candidates, and it just depends what sort of route that Alan Pace and the board want to go down.
Yeah, it always makes for a sort of like not a rubbish podcast, but not as an exciting podcast when all three of us agree. But I agree as well. I think the only name on the list that I don't want is Frank Lampard. Steve Cooper will probably be my number one. I was not surprised to see the negative reaction to Scott Parker, but I don't see the massive issue with Scott Parker. Like you said, 2 promotions on his CV. I think the Premier League is a little bit of a jump up for him, and he's ended up being sacked at both his Premier League jobs. I think if I remember rightly, threw his young players under the bus a little bit at one of his jobs. I think it was Bournemouth. I might be wrong on that one. It could have been the Fulham one. So that was a little bit silly from him. But again, 2 promotions on the CV, and I wouldn't be against him coming in. He's not my number one choice, though, especially. The former Hull boss as well. I think I would like somebody who's been there and done it, with a promotion on the CV, but I think Hull is the step up from Burnley, where he can get that promotion. And same with Corberan as well at West Brom. He's not been like officially mentioned or said that he's on the short list, but he's on the bookies, I'll just put it that way. I know that doesn't mean much. I work at a bookies, so I know that does not mean anything at all. But again, I'd take him. The only one that I've seen so far that I wouldn't want is Frank Lampard. But just sticking with you, Matt, because you mentioned there the big name. Again, you obviously you weren't at the Burnley Express a couple of years ago, but a couple of years ago there was all this chat about, I think, the similar sort of managers on the list. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was a slight rumour of Vincent Kompany. You're in with this, Andy, but a slight rumour of Vincent Kompany. And then next thing you know, he's pictured at a pub in Clitheroe or Whalley or wherever it was. I can't remember. And then everyone's like, well, that picture's clearly fake. You've edited that Turfcast. I'm like, I haven't. Someone sent it me. And then it was proven that it was real because someone sent me the live. But it just came out of nowhere, this massive name. And I have a sneaky feeling that they'll do something like that again. Is there any thoughts that they might do something like that again, like go into Europe, get a massive name? Dare I say Ruud van Nistelrooy? Somebody's mentioned that to me already. A name like that. Do you think they could end up doing that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a sort of a concrete policy of the club to look for a big name. I just think it probably fits in a little bit, obviously, with the strategy of what they're doing in America and whatnot.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
I think it's never confirmed, but I think again I wasn't here at the Burnley Express, but was Wayne Rooney sort of in talks? Was he in the running last time before Kompany? What was he sort of mentioned?
I think he was an early candidate. I think sort of after Dice was sacked. I think he was one of the sort of names that was sort of being linked. I don't know how serious it ever got, but I think he was an initial sort of there was that. Yeah, there's an element. I don't think they'll chase a big name. And I hope that they don't force a big name. Because you can sort of go after someone and think, oh yeah, this makes loads of sense because of the name. They didn't fall lucky with Kompany because they obviously thought he was the right man for the job, and he evidently proved to be. And he obviously had the big profile as well. But I think they'll look in Europe as well. Knutson, who was on that initial shortlist. The 3-man shortlist, he got it down to. Last time they were looking for a manager, and I know he's obviously at that point he was being linked with a lot of jobs, and I think that speculation has certainly died down a lot. I think he still seems to still be doing good work. With Bodo Glimt, so would he come back into the reckoning? I'm not entirely sure. The club may have moved on from that, but they will be looking across Europe. I'm sure of it. They'll do the due diligence, as I said before, because they want to get it right and they need to get it right effectively, and I think they'll consider all the different types of options that they might get. But yeah, I don't think that obviously having a big name helps in terms of profile and branding and all that type of stuff. But I think I don't think they're stupid enough to fall into that. We're just looking for a big name because we need someone to follow Vincent Kompany's name. I just don't think they'll do that. It may end up being a big name, but there will be the reasons behind it. And Kompany, yes, was a big name, but he'd also worked with young players. He also, had, you see it in the documentary that, Pace said he was blown away after talking to him. And, he said all the right things, but also, he carried a lot of them out in terms of shaping the club and the style of play and taking it into a more of the identity that LK wanted. They did want to move away from that Sean Dyche type of football. They wanted to move away from that and, that young, exciting, dynamic football that the Kompany did play last season. And the developing young players, getting on board with the plan and stuff like that. Kompany ticked all of the boxes needed them to tick. It wasn't just because his name was Vincent Kompany. Obviously, it was great from the branding perspective as well, but I certainly don't think that they'll just be looking at who's the big name, who will, help commercially, because you can't get, it's more likely, I think, that you can end up, looking a bit silly after that. It doesn't always work out the way Kompany did.
Yeah, coming to you then, Matt. Sorry. Obviously, they've got to do it soon, like before the players come back for pre-season, which I would suspect would be sometime in July. But we can't rush it, can they? Because they need to get it right. So what sort of time frame or do you think we'll be looking at the club announcing the new manager?
I think they've actually got a bit of time. I read some fans saying that it's not an ideal time. I disagree. I think it's obviously there's never an ideal time to lose your manager. Of course, there's not. But as soon as the season's finished, you got managers now out of work. You have got that time now to get the person right, which is that's all that matters now. And I'd imagine they'll be back. I think it's normally end of June. I think clubs come back for pre-season. So you've got at least 3 or 4 weeks, which is more than enough time to get it right. That's all that matters. If it takes an extra week or so to get it right, then so be it, because it's such a big decision. Although just touching on pre-season, that was one of the questions that I forgot to ask to Kompany's last press conference, if he was planning to bring them back for an early pre-season again after this season. But no, I'd imagine they go back to normal this summer, probably end of June time. So yeah, it gives them 3 or 4 weeks. But as I said, it's very early on at the moment, early sort of stage of collecting names. But I wouldn't be surprised if it moved fairly quickly. Once they speak to managers, get them in a room and interview them, it can quite often move quite quickly.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Like I said, I don't think there's a mad rush to get it done. I agree with you there, Matt. I think do the due diligence.
I think there is an element of, I think, because obviously last time when they had Kompany, they were looking for managers from mid-April. So they were able to plan. And I know Kompany's announcement took forever, but everyone knew he was going to be the new manager, so there was an element of you could speak to him about recruitments, you could start putting stuff in place about the types of players. So I think there is an element of not agency. It's not like it needs to be done by the end of the week type thing. But I think you want to try and get it done as quickly as possible. By at the end of a good process, if you like. But the transfer plans may change. The futures of players will be up in the air a little bit. The club will have obviously the recruitment department and stuff. And the thing is, Kompany was very much involved in that as well. So there's that. There's those changes behind the scenes of the club because Kompany was that involved. That will sort of be affected a little bit. But they'll have plans in place and things like that as well. And they may still look at the same targets they would have been looking at anyway. But I think you do want to know, because the manager might want to play a different system. There's all those types of things. And suddenly you might need, for example, suddenly they want to play a back three. And suddenly you might need another centre half or, more wing backy full backs and stuff like that. So there's all those elements that come into it. So they've certainly got time. There's no need for them to be, needing to appoint someone. But I think there's also the element of, obviously you want them in at the start of pre-season, but I think you also want to be able to formalise your plans about what you're going to do in the market and what players you want to keep, what players are open, you're happy to let go and stuff like that. I think you do need to sort of get that clarity as quickly as possible. But yeah, it's not a case of if they don't do it by, as I say, the end of this week, it's going to be an absolute disaster and everything's going to go wrong from that point onwards. But I think there is an element of you do want to get it done as quickly as possible, while also making sure you do your search is done properly, and you end up with the right man.
Yeah, fair enough. I completely agree. This chat has ended up going on over an hour now. When I first reached out to you both, I think I said 30 minutes. So I do apologise for that. That's a good sign, though. It shows that obviously we're having a good chat and you're both good talkers, as you'd expect from journalists, to be fair, or a failed journalist in myself. You'd expect it to be a good chat. But we'll start wrapping it up unless there's anything you lads want to quickly add.
I was a quick point. Sorry to extend, I try not to go on for another 20 minutes. I was just going to say, this is not based on anything I've heard or been told. This is just my pure speculation. I'll be interested to see what happens behind the scenes of the club. With this search for a manager, will it be a manager they bring in, or will it be a head coach? Because I think people listening to this might think, that's just a title. It doesn't mean anything. I slightly disagree with that. I think it does mean something different. I think if they were to go down again, if they were to go someone like Liam Rosenior, who's known to work in the head coach role, he works in a set structure, which could be interesting how that affects things in terms of managerial search. Because I think, could we see, I don't know, a director of football, a sporting director come in, people that more involved in recruitment rather than just having Vincent Kompany in charge of all the players coming in. Essentially, it'd be interesting to see if I don't know, a Steve Cooper or a senior, that type of figure, rather than more of a manager figure than like a David Moyes or a Scott Parker, if that does spell any change behind the scenes, which again might be something worth sort of looking out for this summer.
Yeah, definitely be interested to see how the club do restructure it, if they do restructure it, of course. But yeah, lads, thank you for coming on. And obviously, you've been here plenty of times before. You've even got your hat-trick ball. That's your 4th appearance. Thank you for coming on again, mate. It's a pleasure. And Matt, thank you for coming on for the first time. Hopefully, we'll get you both on at various points during the season. I titled this Journo Talk. I were going to call it Press Pass, because when I used to work in journalism, one of my mates used to call me Press Pass. But then when I searched Press Pass, see if anybody else had named anything Press Pass, Burnley Football Club named something Press Pass. I'm like, well, I can't do that. So I just called it Journo Talk. But we'll get you both on at various points over the season, not every week, not every 2 weeks or something. You just, maybe once a month, something like that. And just get your thoughts on it. Might be separately, it might be all together, it might be with someone from BBC Lancashire or BBC Sport, because I've recently been in contact with them. But remember to follow the lads on Twitter. It's @Jones_Journo, I believe, is it? For you?
That's it,
yeah. And are you just Matt Scrafton? I can't remember exactly what your @ is.
Underscore Scrafton.
Matt _Scrafton, that's it. Yeah, please follow lads on Twitter. I'm sure you do anyway already. But we will wrap it up there. Lads, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully see you during a successful season at the club.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for having us.